What's up, everybody? Pastor Matt here. Hey, stop calling everybody the R word. Let's talk about that here in this short video. My name is Matt, one of the pastors of Gospel Fellowship PCA, Bible-believing church just north of Pittsburgh. Love for you to come visit us sometime. Okay, so quit calling everybody the R word. And I'm just going to call it the R word in this video because it's such a serious word that I hate to even say it. The R word, of course, is one of the most serious accusations that you could possibly make about another person. Have you ever been in the sanctuary before or an auditorium where you hear this terrible high-pitched squeal that just kind of gets out of control? Yeah, it's called a positive feedback loop, and that's what happens when the microphone picks up the speaker and the speaker picks up the microphone, and on it goes. And it grows exponentially, this noise does, until it's absolutely just deafening, and somebody's got to go shut down the soundboard or hit mute across every single channel. So this kind of feedback loop is the situation in which we find our culture today. It's kind of what happens with gangs, believe it or not, in the inner city, the Crips and the Bloods. One of them commits violence against the other. They have to get retributive justice against them. So back and forth with revenge after revenge. And so today in our culture, we obviously have this paradigm where we have two different groups warring against each other. You have what you might call the conservatives on one hand or the progressives on the other, or if you want to use the political names of Democrat, Republican, whatever it is. But the R word is the most sinister badge that you can possibly put upon your opponent's chest. And if you are called an R word or be shown to be acting as though you were committing the sin of the R word, that is one of the most damaging things that you could possibly be accused of. You'll lose your job, you lose your reputation, lose your titles, lose your prerogatives. Man, it is totally destructive, which is exactly why people keep using the R word to accuse the other person. It's like kind of lobbing a Molotov cocktail of the worst possible insult upon your opponent. Well, let me share with you why I don't use that word to describe people in most ordinary circumstances. I may occasionally use that word in the most extreme of circumstances, but that's not an accusation that I prefer to lob against somebody in order to hurt or destroy them. And here's why. So when Jesus talks about the greatest commandment and the second greatest commandment, he says the first greatest commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. And the second commandment is like it, which is to love your neighbor as yourself. So if somebody's failing in the first greatest commandment, that's the sin that we call blasphemy. It's a terrible sin. It's the sin of hating God with your heart. And likewise then, the second greatest commandment, the sin would be hating your neighbor. And so since the R word is a form of violating the second greatest commandment, to love your neighbor, you're actually assuming that that person hates their neighbor. And so think about this. You're saying that you know their heart, that there's hatred inside their heart for a particular group or people or kind or whatever. You think that you know their heart so well that you're going to accuse them of hating their neighbor in their heart. Wow. How it's just like mind-blowing that one might think that they know another person's heart so well that they're going to assign that sin to them. Now, I may have reason to suspect that they're committing the sin of the R word. I might have actually very good evidence to suppose that they're committing the sin of the R word. But to actually accuse them of that is greatly arrogant, because in accusing them of the sin of the R word, here's what I'm saying. I'm saying that I know without a shadow of the doubt what their motivation is for the way that they act or talked, and that motivation is the sin of the R word. I am arrogantly assuming that I know precisely what their motivation is, and I'm going to assign it to the sin of the R word. Now, that's actually an extraordinary statement, because as it turns out, knowing another person's heart is way more difficult than you might think. See, we're complex individuals, and sometimes we act in ways that displease one another, but in actuality, we act in ways, though they displease the other, they're prompted by or motivated by certain factors or circumstances that the other person is not aware of. So very often what we do is we attribute to that person the worst possible motivation. They must have acted like that because they are committing the sin of the R word. And when I do that, I am I am assuming quite a bit about that person. I am assuming that I know the truest motivation in their heart, and that motivation is utterly despicable and to be despised. Now that's a lot to say about another person, which is why I think we ought to be far more judicious in our use of the R word than we actually are. Can you prove that that's the motivating factor for the way a person acts or does something or responds or doesn't respond? Pretty difficult to prove what the motivating factors are in their heart, and it's pretty low of us to assume that it's hatred. And so here's what we've done. We call entire voting blocks the R word. We've called entire states, entire states, the R word. We've called entire professions the R word. Sometimes a university or a class or a celebrity or a political figure, and we so easily throw out the R word. And when we do that, man, we are absolutely assaulting that person by using the vocabulary that's probably going to bring about the most real world damage to that person. In fact, isn't that why we even use that word? Because we want to damage that person and their reputation as badly as we possibly can. So what do? We assume the worst and we assign the worst kinds of language to it, when in fact we may actually be wrong. Has it ever occurred to you that what you think is a person's hateful motivation might actually be a false assumption on your part? It is possible, isn't it? It is possible that you don't know your neighbor's heart as well as you think you do, which is why I rarely use the term. And I think, this is my personal opinion, that our culture would be far better off if we would be more charitable, more judicious, and far more cautious with our speech, especially when it comes to assigning the R word as the motivation for the hatred that we think we see in another person's heart. All right? So be careful with that word. It's very powerful. Maybe we should use it less. Hey, thanks for checking into my channel today. Hope this was helpful to you. Feel free to like and subscribe to this channel if it would be of benefit to you. If not, no big deal. But either way, yours truly, Pastor Matt. Love you lots. Checking out for now. Talk to you later.